Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Conrad Smith with AIM Transportation Solutions. As you know, the CVSA Brake Safety Week is coming up. It's going to run from August 23rd through the 29th. And throughout that week, inspectors across North America will conduct commercial vehicle inspections with an increased focus on brake systems and components. Now, this year, inspectors will be paying particularly close attention to brake drums and rotors, making now a great time to ensure your vehicles, your drivers, and your maintenance teams are all prepared. And now joining us to help you do just that is the one and only John Rugarber. He's the Regional Safety Manager here at AIM, and some of you might know him as Safety John if you're subscribed to our safety week, our weekly safety bulletins. John brings extensive experience in safety and compliance, and he'll walk us through what fleets need to know heading into Brake Safety Week, what inspectors will be looking for, and the practical steps you can take to help reduce violations and keep your vehicles safely on the road. Now, before we turn things over to John, I just want to quickly introduce AIM for anyone who's joining us who may not be familiar with our company. Now, AIM Transportation Solutions is a family-owned and operated business with a history going back a whopping 120 years. At the very beginning, it was literally a horse and buggy. And today, we're the largest privately held truck leasing company in the U.S., and we have more than 100 locations and operations across the United States, and we support customers across a wide range of industries with our comprehensive menu of services, which include full service truck leasing, commercial vehicle rentals, dedicated contract carriage, maintenance, professional shop management, freight brokerage, and used truck sales. So whether we're providing the equipment, maintaining a fleet, or managing an entire transportation operation, our goal is to give businesses the expertise, the resources, and the support they need to operate safely, efficiently, and cost effectively. And really a big part of that, of what we do, is education. And that's a big way that we support not only our customers, but just the industry as a whole, which brings us to today's webinar. Now, before I hand things over, just a quick note about questions. We will have a Q&A session at the end of John's presentation, but feel free to submit questions using the Q&A feature or the chat at any point during the webinar, and then we'll get to those once John wraps up. So with that, I'll turn things over to our expert. John, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
All right, Conrad. Well, thank you very much. Again, this is, I think we're at number 15 on the webinars. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for having me on. Welcome, everyone. As Conrad said, my name is John Rugarber. I am a safety manager with AIM Transportation Solutions and AIM Integrated Logistics. Been with them for about 23 years. Worked my way up from being a driver to being a safety manager, and now I do presentations for us and some different types of education for our drivers. So like Conrad mentioned, this Operation Air Brake, it's an annual event sponsored by CVSA, Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance. It's going to occur August 23rd through the 29th, which is Saturday night at midnight, the 23rd, running into August 29th at midnight on that following Saturday. I'm sorry, you know what, 23rd I think is a Sunday. So that's kind of what is going to be occurring, and we're about, 10 days away from that occurring. So we have about 10 days to kind of get this information to our drivers and try to help them get through these inspections successfully. So let's start with the first slide. So what is Operation Air Brake? I kind of just described it. Commercial motor vehicle inspectors will increase their focus and reinforce the importance of the operation and maintenance of brake systems on commercial motor vehicles throughout North America. Keep in mind, this is inclusive of Canada, Mexico, and the United States. It's not just in the United States. So if you were to go into CVSA's website, look at the breakdown of, for example, 2025s, you'll see that they break it out into different regions. First being United States, second Canada, and third Mexico. But some of their numbers are a compilation of all three of those areas. So just keep that in mind if you go in there and you look through that. So some of the key points. So going to be reinforce the importance of the operation and maintenance of a commercial motor vehicle system. I got a lot of pictures on this, real life pictures. Really, none of them are manufactured necessarily. Some I have taken myself with our own fleet. Others I've grabbed off of other different areas. But really, pictures say 1,000 words, right? Everybody's idea is a little bit different, a little subjective as to what something means. But when you show a picture, it tends to give the real meaning. So I think the pictures will be very helpful when you see them, and I'll talk through them, and we'll talk through some of the regulations. Next is knowing what the officers will be looking for. And again, that's where the pictures come into play. Pictures will be what the actual officer is looking at and what he is going to write up as a violation, if it's going to be a violation. So it's really important to know kind of what the officers know as best you can. And we don't expect our drivers to necessarily know that, but if we can get our maintenance team on board, our management teams, all the way down from the driver manager to the dispatcher, every little bit helps in this whole process. Coaching our drivers. So we want to make an effort. We have 10 days really to get with our drivers and let them know what's going on in terms of the inspection coming up, what's going to be looked for, when they're going to occur, which is going to be 24 hours a day for those 7 days. So you'll see an increase in the inspection stations being open, probably be setting up some more portables out of the blue. You never saw one here, and today it's here. So they'll be making a big push, and we want to make our drivers aware that this is going to occur. And also last, to reduce the violations and the crash risk. So reducing the violations really is a two-pronged effort, because those violations will affect the company and the driver in their CSA scores, the driver in their PSP, pre-employment screening program, and the driver or the company's actual CSA score. So really, we want to try to reduce or at the best eliminate any of these violations. In terms of crash risk, brakes, I would imagine, are either one or two. Tires probably being one or two, where if you don't have one of those, your chances of crashing grow quite a bit. So the brakes are pretty important, and if we have good operating brakes, then the chances of us having an accident because of a mechanical failure really is eliminated from that perspective. Not to say it wouldn't be the driver's fault, but at least your brakes are working properly, your slack adjusters are working, your linings are in good shape, your drums are in good shape, your airlines, anything associated with that brake system is in good shape. So that's kind of the key points that we're going to look at. All right, so kind of going back to what I had mentioned, what are we actually looking for? What's that target? So this year's focus, and this is based off of 2025's previous inspections. They go back and they look at what the most common violations are. Last year was drums and rotors. So that's why this year it's going to be drums and rotors is the focus. The previous year, I think it was going to be brake components and brake systems in general. So this year they narrowed it down into brake drums and rotors. So that's really the answer as to why the brakes are going to be targeted in this, or why the rotors and drums are going to be targeted in this particular inspection period of time. So brake-related violations, they comprise about 14.9% of the out-of-service violations per the 25 Brake Safety Week results. For the United States, again, remember Mexico and Canada was included, but this breaks it out, 14.9% for the United States.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
I think we're still, are you meaning to be on our the target slide? The slide with the target?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. Yeah, okay. I had an animation here, but doesn't seem to be coming up, but that's okay. We'll work through that.
Okay.
And the vehicles will be placed out of service if critical vehicle violations are found. And I know probably 90% of the people on this call right now are saying, what is a critical violation? Because that's what I would be saying. But the critical violations are violations with a severe mechanical or operational defect. So pretty simple, right? Probably the brakes aren't working in one form or fashion. Really, is what they're calling a critical violation. It does change up a little bit, critical versus acute, when you're talking about CSA and the SMS. But for this particular example, critical violations are if the brakes aren't working properly. So hopefully that explained that for everyone. And Conrad, all I have to do is click the button and I'd be good to go. All right, so there's my animations, everybody. I thought I'd let you wait in anticipation of that next animation. So let's move on to the next slide. All right, so here's a little snapshot of the 2025 results. This is for the out of service brake violation part. You can see where that 20% criteria right here, there were 1,199 violations. Other brake violations didn't really describe it in detail, so I'm not really sure what they are. They could be a number of different things. Could be anything. Could be cracked brake drums. I don't even know for sure. They've included the brake hoses and tubing in here, 306 violations of that. In addition to the steering axle violations, which again didn't identify it specifically. And then the air loss rate at 100 violations. So I've included a PDF in this of the actual brake test, which most drivers don't remember. I've trained up our mechanics. I've trained other drivers. I've done hundreds of ride-alongs with drivers. And it was relatively surprising at how many drivers didn't know the brake test. I know in different states, there's a little different formats. Some are very short, some are extended. So we put together for AIM a sheet, and it's a Word doc that you could change, and you could put your company's logo on the top, signature line, account line, date, all that good stuff that you could give to your drivers, pass it out in meetings, maybe give it to them if the dispatcher or manager meets them in the morning or at the end of the day. Just something to bring awareness to the actual brake process. Because inevitably, if he gets inspected and the officer asks him to apply the brakes, he will apply it, but he won't really know the process that the officer is looking for in terms of lack of air or the loss or the rate of loss when the driver does it. So again, that'll be given at the end of the presentation. We'll send it out also to everyone who signed up. Feel free to use it as you see fit. Again, it's a Word doc. You can remove the AIM logo off the top and put your own logo in there, and you'd be good to go. So just in case we forgot where the little red dots went, they identified the 100 and the 1199 there for that. All right, so here we get into the drum and rotor violations, and that's kind of what this whole thing is based about this year. As you can see, the broken rotor, there were 22 of them. Now, obviously, the air disc brakes, right, is going to be a rotor, whether it be a rusted rotor or a broken rotor. That's why you see those numbers there, and you're not seeing them here because this has to do with more drum brakes. So we had 22 violations of air disc brakes. The rusted rotor, we had 50 violations of that, again, raising the concern about rotor care and drum care. The metal to metal didn't really apply to the air disc brakes, nor did the broken drum, because again, they're disc brakes and they're working with a caliper. So we have a grand total of 72 down here. Move over to the S-cam brakes, you're not going to see a rotor on that portion. Metal to metal, really, they probably wouldn't get that bad unless you got down to the rivets. And at that point, the linings could fall off. You could have metal to metal, but they obviously didn't find any. But they did find 32 broken drums. So we'll see some pictures coming up regarding that to see the broken drums, just in case anybody wasn't aware of what they would look for. It's probably going to be 2 slides forward from here. 32 violations of that. And then we had the hydraulics, which is relatively minimal. Adding these all up, you come up to 9 on the hydraulic portion of it. So really the focus is more on the rotors for the discs and the drums for the regular S-cam brakes type styles. All right, so I'm going to give Conrad his spotlight here. This is a video. It's sponsored by or was put out by Commercial Carrier Journal. It's really informative. Very clear, very crystal clear. Jeremy Disbrow, I think, was CVSA and an inspecting officer. Does a great job. I'd highly recommend that everyone watches it. We're just going to do a little snippet here of it to give you an idea, but it clearly explains the 20% criteria. And the officer is going to go through, and it's almost like being at an inspection. It's really crystal clear. So, Conrad, if you'd like to take over for a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just say the word when you want me to stop it.
Okay.
Linings, brake adjustment, all those kinds of things are 20%. And when I say 20%, we're talking about the entire combination. So if it's a truck and a trailer, it includes all the brakes. So a truck tractor typically has 6 brakes, a trailer has 4. So you're looking at a 10 brake combination. And that's how it's treated when you're calculating the 20%. So it would take 2 defects on that 10 brake vehicle to get you to the 20%, right? Then in addition to that, we have the front steer axle. So the front steer axle is included in the 20%, but it also has certain violations that are standalone. Not all of them, but some of them are standalone violations that will put it out of service. So for instance, an inoperable brake where it's doing nothing when you press on the brake pedal, if that's on the steer axle, that's going to automatically put that truck out of service because it's on the steer axle, and it will affect the handling and the braking. And that violation is also part of the 20%. And the reason that it's done that way is the 20% looks at the overall vehicle. So let's say you have that one inoperable brake on the truck tractor on the steer axle, and you have one inoperable brake on the trailer. You're going to add those together. So now you have 2 out of 10 for that total combination. So now that truck tractor is going to be placed out of service, and the trailer is going to be placed out of service because they both contributed to the 20% to get you to the 20%. On the flip side, if all of the violations are on the track,
I think we're good, Conrad. So I think everybody gets the idea. Again, very informative. If there's any question in terms of what the 20% criteria involves, that would really clear it up nicely. So I thought I'd put that in there, and thank you, Conrad, for being my technological guru. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. I'm gonna share the link to that video in the chat for everyone.
Cool. So really quick on that, if the number of defective brakes is equal to or greater than 20% of the service brakes on the vehicle or combination. So that's kind of what that's about. So for example, 4 through 10 brakes, 10 brakes being a full tractor trailer combination, 2 brakes would be in that 20% criteria. 12 and 14 brakes, you'd need 3 brakes to fall into that 20%. 16 through 20 brakes, you'd need 4 brakes to fall into that criteria. And 22 up and above, multiply that by 0.02, and that'll get you the number of brakes before you hit the 20% criteria. And that number is rounded up. So if you hit a 4.8, for example, you're going to go up to 5 brakes being out of service. And if you're running 22 or more, God bless you, you're probably doing big, heavy haul type of stuff with a lot of wheels. So that's kind of a quick overview on that. Again, really great video. I'd highly recommend that you watch it if you have any questions regarding that 20% criteria. Next, so let's talk about the condition of the brake drums itself. The only time you're probably ever going to see this brake drum is when you buy it. Once it gets put on the truck, it's probably never going to look like that again. But ideally, it'd be nice if they all look like that forever. And let's look at some more intimate details about some brake drums. So here's some really good pictures. These 2 pictures on the right, hopefully you could see that cursor moving, is taken directly out of the CVSA out of service criteria book. I'd highly recommend it to everyone. It's probably $45 or $50. You could purchase it. You do not have to be a member of CVSA. If you don't have it, you really should get that in your library. It's a great book, informative. It's really detailed. I mean, I can't say enough about it. It's a great book. I'd purchase it. I have one. I get one every year, actually. They update, not greatly, but they do update a little bit. Before I click on, I want to identify this yellow circle here. This has to do with the S-cam bushings. And again, a little throwaway, really. I put it in here, just something to be aware of. And we're going to see another little video in a little bit, just a quick snippet of TikTok of a guy explaining how you can kind of tell if S-cam bushings are defective. So that's kind of why I circled that. This, for example, on the brake drum, now it says linings, cracks, or voids that exceed 1/16 of an inch in width or observable on the edge of the lining. This also applies to brake linings on the pads, but it's more or less explaining this void or this crack that the drum has incurred. So that's kind of why you'll see the same thing when we come up on the linings and pad. So don't get confused when well, they're talking about drums and it says linings, but they're focusing more on the cracks or the voids that exceed 1/16 of an inch. And then you have the same exact issue, and you can see right here the 39347A is also down here, and this is based on the out of service criteria book, part 2 G4, and you could find that in that book if you were to purchase it, or if you have it right now, which you may. But there's another example of that cracked brake drum right there. And then here's a good view. Just clearly see this cracked brake drum right here running right down the middle. So obviously out of service problems, that driver wouldn't be able to go any further with that particular criteria involved. Next, the condition of the rotors. Similar to the drums, it's beautiful when you go down to the place in your repair facility and you buy it, man, you don't even want to put it on. It looks so nice. You almost want to frame it, but you want the truck to move, so you got to put it on. So that's kind of what we're talking about on the rotors. And let's move on to the next one. We got some good pictures. So here we have metal to metal contact. This is again taken out. Now all 4 of these pictures are taken out of that CVSA out of service criteria book. Falls under LOS. That's what it stands for. Part 2 is a little different here, 6 and 7. And again, this changes to 393.48A. But they're describing metal to metal contact on this. So rotor has evidence of metal to metal contact on the friction surface. Rotor has severe rusting across the entire friction surface on either side. Now, I think we can clearly see that this rotor here is in bad shape. It's obviously an older setup, but this will clearly be severe rusting. Some of you may be wondering, well, what is severe rusting? It doesn't really define it to that degree. It's probably subjective, left up to the officer to decide on site. But if it ever got this bad, I think we all could clearly agree that this is pretty severely rusted. But if you are seeing rust on rotors, it's something to look into. Not to say that you have to change it, but you should begin to investigate your mechanics. The drivers won't necessarily get a great view of that, especially if you have backing plates on the back of your brake assemblies. You may not even be able to see that. Some you may, but the backing plates will inhibit you from being able to see that rotor. But again, just be aware of it. Try to make an effort to do the best you can to be aware of that if it occurs. But the maintenance team in general, they should have a crystal clear view of whether rotors are too rusty to continue to be run. Down here, we have worn out rotors, a little different type of a setup with these little things here. And I'm not a mechanic. There may be some mechanics or maybe some mechanical guys on the call that are familiar with this kind of look. I'm just not, but they're using this as a pad with a thickness of 1/16 or less for disc brakes. So that's where they're getting the violation in off of this one. And then you can obviously, the cracked rotor is, again, crystal clear, right on the edge there. Not a good place to be in terms of having a rotor on your truck. So any rotor or disc with a crack in the length of more than 75% of the friction surface and pass completely through the rotor to the center vent from either side or completely through a structural support connecting the rotor friction surfaces. So I'm not a big fan of putting a lot of letters and words on the PowerPoint, but it kind of explains it pretty clearly in case there are any questions from anybody out there. So again, pictures are worth 1,000 words. I think this does a great job of bringing that out to the forefront. And again, everybody that's on this webinar will get this PowerPoint, so feel free to keep it, do what you like with those pictures. We'll move on to the next one. So let's talk about the condition of the brake linings and the pads. So let's remember the whole focus is going to be drums and rotors, but there's a lot of trucks out there with drum brakes, S-cams. So that's kind of why we're throwing this in there. I did it last year. I used this. We're going to use it again this year and look at some more pictures. And we're going to talk about a few different things that apply to the condition of the brake linings and the pads themselves. So here's some really good pictures. We got brake linings up here. You can see this one's in really bad shape. Most times when you see a crack on the side view, which is really all you're going to have as a driver, there's a great chance that it migrated through to the entire width of the brake lining. That crack is probably not just on the corner all by itself. It's probably migrated through at that point. This one's in really bad shape. A really, really good example of it for those who can't see it so well. And part of the problem too, forget the fact that it's affecting your brakes and effective braking, but if one of these chunks come off on the road, they become a flying object. And that can do quite a bit of damage at 70 miles an hour to other people, in addition to damaging your own vehicle. As you drive over it, it ends up cutting brake lines to the trailer on the backside, your air lines to the trailer, run over it with a trailer tire, and now you have a flat tire. So there's so many things that can continue to happen when you let this continue to occur. And that's why there's such a big push on keeping an eye on this kind of stuff. If you look closely over here, same thing. You could see the horizontal cracks along the way. But right here, this little separation here, for those who can see that difference, that's the beginning of rust jacking, and it's mostly occurs in the Northeast, for example, and even northern states, the Dakotas, maybe Oregon, wherever they use salt and corrosive materials, that material or liquid will get in between the metal lining and the pad itself and begin to form rust. And the rust itself will begin to expand, and the end result is the cracks begin. So on top of it just being a crack, you're also seeing some rust jacking in that case. So really, for those people who run up in the Northeast, the upper Midwest, Ohio, up into the Michigan and Wisconsin and all those states that run corrosive salt melting compounds, you really want to keep a close eye on that. And again, drivers can see this. If drivers make the effort to get down and underneath of their trailer or tractor, use a flashlight and look hard, the drivers can identify this type of violation. So there's really no reason that that shouldn't be caught by a driver on either his pre, post, and route inspections along those lines. Again, we'll go back to this one. You can see the crack migrating all the way through to the brake lining itself from one side to the other. Again, another similar picture to this one where a chunk of this brake lining could come out and fall on the roadway. Right here, another good example of the rust jacking beginning to occur. You can see the horizontal line here. Now, there is some criteria for the out of service, which we'll get to in a minute. But right here, this particular one, this isn't pertaining to cracks or rust jacking or anything like that. It's really the oil and grease contamination that is part of the out of service criteria for brake linings. So I'm going to expand this a little bit and let's see close. So this grease and oil lining from the grease wouldn't be a problem necessarily. Where the problem could occur is right along the edge of the lining, and that will be left up to the officer's discretion. Does he call that being the brake lining being contaminated by oil and grease? We're going to see a picture coming up here in a little bit that's clearly a problem, but this one could go either way. So I'm not sure what to say about it. And it's not a great picture, I granted, but you get the point that grease had kind of melted and migrated into the lining here. So it would be interesting to see what the officer calls that. He could go really by the book and say it is, but is it thoroughly contaminated? But really another big indicator too is really what probably drew my attention. I think I'm the one that took this picture at some point in time, was this, where the lining has moved away from the drum. So that can be indicative of a spring that had broken inside. That's probably really what this picture was focused on when I took it and when I used it. But secondarily, it's a really nice thing to bring attention to. Drivers don't have to really that upset seeing drops of grease laying on this part of the lining. But when it gets into the lining itself is when they need to take special care. So just something to bring up to people. Again, it'd be interesting if there's any officers on this call by chance, or any inspectors or any other opinions. I'd really like to hear the opinion of what they feel this would be called. And then going to the note portion of it, lining cracks or voids that exceed 1/16 of an inch in width, observable on the edge of the lining, seeing rivets exposed, cracks that exceed 1.5 inches in length, loose lining segments, give or take an inch and a 1/16 worth of movement, obviously pads or linings missing, surface of the lining pad contaminated with oil or grease, the thickness of the pad less than 1/4 of an inch, or worn into the wear indicator, which is going to be the next slide. We'll talk about that in a minute. Measured at the center. So it's kind of what you want to look for. Bring your drivers aware of that. I don't know. I don't think a lot of drivers are aware to this degree of what's entailed in the linings. So definitely something worth bringing up to your drivers. So here's a nice, perfect picture, right? Everything looks perfect in the world of drawings. But here's a good example of really the angle here. So when the lining has worn down to that point there, I don't know what the minimum is going to be at that point, but that's the point that you should begin to pay attention to getting the linings replaced if you're not there. So if you can look in at your lining from the side, you may see an angled portion. And at that point, you'd be good to go. When that angle disappears and you're seeing that line, a flat line all the way across, it's time to start questioning whether or not I need linings or not. You'll also have the lip of the drum, which is going to be used as some indicator in terms of getting up to where there would be a line in the lining itself, which the next picture that's going to drop down is going to really bring that to the front of that picture. You'll clearly see it. Secondarily, this is a cross view, kind of looking across at the brake. Here's the drum. There's that little edge that would probably be indicative of the edge along here. And then here would be your open area. So when this area wears this down and you get to where you're getting to this line here, and I'm hoping everybody can see this cursor on this screen. I have a smaller shot, so I'm hoping that
we see it, John.
Okay, I'm hoping I'm clearly explaining this to everyone. So this is the drum. This is that leading edge of the drum, which is probably similar to this leading edge here. And then this is the area that would wear out. And when that's all you have left is when that would be time to start looking at replacing those linings. So again, perfect picture, right? This is the stuff that engineers give you, tell you to fix everything. And I don't understand how you miss that. But then the real world comes into play and we get a real picture. So you have a real picture of the lining, the drum, the backing of the lining, and the drum itself. Again, there's that slight angle there, if you can see it. Right there, there's a slight angle on the lining. And the other, in that picture, it didn't have the horizontal line, but you can see this horizontal line here. And that's where the leading edge of the brake drum, when that brake drum gets to this point and you can't see that line, that might be an indicator that you're down to that wear indicator. It's time to start looking at either getting new brakes or getting them measured or just taking a look at them. Now let's move on to the fact that we have a crack here. So all things being equal, this has got to be replaced because there's a crack there. But it was a good example of the different criteria for someone who doesn't know about the line there, the angle on the edge of the linings, and then using the edge, the leading edge of the brake drum itself to give you an indication when it covers this line here. That would be an indicator that it's time to really look into getting the brakes replaced and doing that. So I hope that kind of cleared things up for some people and maybe gives a real visual to what you need to be looking at. And the infamous, here we go, the wall of pictures, as I like to call it. So many pictures, so many explanations. Let's look a little closer real quick. I think probably everybody's going to look at this one and go, oh my God, I think I see a push rod that disconnected from the slack adjuster. And I would say you're right. Somehow that either sheared off or got unscrewed. I think it's sheared off. The original picture is a little clearer. So definitely problematic. Definitely something a driver should see. There's not a reason in the world that a driver would not have been able to see that particular violation. Next, we got down into a cracked airline. Again, no reason in the world why he couldn't have seen that cut in the airline, because the inspector, when he gets on his creeper, is definitely going to be able to see that. It looks like it could be probably either the drives or the trailer tire, but even if that was a steer coming in from the top onto the brake chamber, you should clearly be able to see that cut in the airline. Here we have the blue and red airlines. As a quick aside, in the interior color of both these blue and the reds are white. If that wears to show white, that is an out of service on these particular type of thermoplastic nylon lines, I think they're called. If you see that white turning white in there, that is technically an out of service on that particular line. As you can see something there. I don't know if it's material or not, but just to give you a heads up, if that turns white around there, that means it's into the inner liner of that line, and that would be an out of service. We have a little cut here in this line going into the glad hand. That would need to be addressed. And this is what I mentioned earlier. This is an inner wheel seal that had leaked. That's the inside of a tire, probably one of the trailer axles, not exactly sure. That, I don't think anybody can disagree that that's going to be oil and grease contamination in that area. So that's liquid oil. You'll see a puddle at the bottom on the ground. Again, easily identifiable by a driver who's doing a proper pre-trip, post-trip, or en route inspection. Not a reason in the world that he should be put out of service for that. Do they go as you're driving? They do. But to miss that on a pre-trip or a post-trip inspection is really problematic from a managerial point of view. This gentleman here, I guess he made a good effort. Used some black electrical tape. Probably not a good idea. And another thing, in case someone didn't know, that these springs are mandated to be on this line. That is to eliminate the kinking of the line, which would constrict the airflow. So even if he didn't have, even if he did not have that electrical tape there, the fact that there's not a spring on this line is a violation in and of itself. Because if he were to jackknife or make a tight turn, this line is going to kink instead of a soft round, I guess, for lack of a better word. Probably not a great word, but this line has a less of a chance of kinking because of the spring than this line does, because the spring is not on there. So those springs do need to be there. Another great example down here. I noticed someone put on the screen wasn't moving, so I went back down to the small, hoping that I wasn't making some disappear. Another great line, this is a horrendous picture of just poor maintenance. The brake lining is completely soaked. I mean, for all intents and purposes, this brake doesn't even need to be on the truck because it's not doing a thing. This line here, if you can see right there, there's fabric coming through that rubber hose, completely out of service. There's a fine line between out of service and a strict violation. It's described in the airline hose portion of that CVSA booklet that I mentioned earlier. But this is clearly out of service. You can see cloth through here, it wore through. Definitely problematic. And this one, obviously, it's got a bulge on it. So you could see where these different kind of glad hands, guys have different types on there. There's not a spring associated with that. And to tell you the God's honest truth, I don't know if that size or that type of glad hand handle would remove the need for the spring. I could look into that. I don't have the answer if anybody asks me that. If somebody knows the answer, I'd be more than happy to take it. But at this particular time, I'm not aware of that, so I don't know for sure. But the bulge in and of itself is the out of service criteria or the violation on that particular hose. So again, a couple thousand points worth of pictures here. All of them are out of service. Every one of the pictures will be an out of service criteria. And there's hundreds of other pictures that are similar to these. So just wanted to put it out there for people. Moving on, and this is kind of a throwaway. I hate putting this kind of stuff on the PowerPoint slide, but it was necessary to get the point across about the camshaft bushing. And if we go back to the earlier slide where I had the yellow circle, that kind of was what this was talking about. Here is the picture of this particular violation. This would have been a problematic inspection. The guy used whatever, he's probably trying to hide it. The officer saw it, pulled it away. Probably the camshaft bushing is shot in there. Conrad, I'm going to pull you in out of the crowd, and I'm going to ask you if you could click on that link.
Yep.
And this is another really good little 30-second TikTok thing that's really informational if we can get it up there. So you want to run with that?
Yep, here we go.
We're replacing brakes and S-cams and drums on a truck today, so I'm going to show you guys one of the telltale signs of bad S-cams and or cam bushings. So you'll see this brake on the bottom here is like brand new. It's fully thick, literally almost brand new. Then the one on the top here is almost out of service. And also, it's got this giant crack down the middle of it. And the reason that happens is when you have worn cams, it's going to push force to one brake shoe or the other. You're only using one brake shoe, so you're going to have twice the wear. It's going to get hot. You're going to have crazy cracks like that, and they're going to wear out twice as quick, so you're going to be putting brake shoes on twice as quick. So if you're seeing this type of different wear between your tops and bottoms on your shoes, you most likely have a brake cam issue.
Thank you, Conrad.
Yep.
So I found that really informative. I think one of the takeaways of that would be the fact that you can tell your drivers to look and they can see those linings and they can tell if they're worn differently. So that would be a great indicator. The driver may not know it's a camshaft bushing, but the fact that he sees that lining worn irregularly around the exterior or the outside of that lining could be enough of an indicator for him to say, hey, something's wrong, which it is, but he could even have a little insight and tell the mechanic or the tech that, hey, I think it's the camshaft bushing. I think we've included this PDF in there. I'm not sure. If we haven't, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to send that on. It's an operational policy that the CVSA has. They have a number of operation policy things. You could actually Google it and it will probably come up, but there's quite a few of them. So thought that was really interesting. I've underlined, let's see, a missing or excessively worn camshaft bushing may result in brakes having excessive push rod stroke or worn out linings on the bottom shoe or inoperative brake. So that's difficult for me to read too, ladies and gentlemen. I feel for you. I'm sure you're probably not able to see it either that well, but I thought it was worth throwing in there just as an aside since we're on the Brake Safety Week. Next, so why, we're here and we're doing this whole thing, and why should I really care? Well, the CSA impacts really is at the top of the line. For one, all these violations will affect your fleet CSA SMS profile. The brake violations are 4-point violations. If you're placed out of service, which a lot of times you are, go ahead and add an extra 2 points onto that. Keep in mind that under CSA, that violation will remain in your profile with a multiplier of 3 for 6 months, a multiplier of 2 for 6 more months. The last year, it's a multiplier of 1. So it remains on your system for that period of time. Drivers, it'll stay on their system for 3 years, with the multiplier being 3 at 3 years, 2 at 2 years, and 1 at 1 year. And it's going to affect the driver's PSP. So when we hire drivers, the PSP is part of the requirement that we look at, and we can identify what drivers really take an interest in doing their pre-trips, post-trip, and en route inspections. Increased insurance costs, again, it goes without saying, anybody on this call that is running the business understands the insurance costs are only going up. Anything you can do to try to bring those costs down is going to be in your benefit. So again, by making drivers aware and giving them this information and really making sure that you get clean inspections is going to help your insurance costs. Crash liability has become a real hot topic recently. If anybody is aware, C.H. Robinson just lost a $604 million judgment out of Texas. the Supreme Court ruled in May of 26 that freight brokers may be held responsible. So now the brokers themselves need to really start vetting who they use to move freight, because they can be pulled in. Now, obviously, CH appealed this decision. Who knows what's going to come of it? But you just don't even want to get involved in that if you can help it. Another one, Landstar, has also reduced their capacity or their carrier pool by 35% since 2022. So they removed almost 1 out of 3 of their carriers based on safety, security, and the service itself. So another reason, I don't know what entities we have on this call necessarily, but another reason really to keep an eye on that. And there's been a recent $86 million verdict against a Utah-based company called QXO, despite finding that the carrier was not negligent at all. So that crash liability and the nuclear verdicts are really becoming a problem. There is some legislation, I think, trying to get passed, but at the moment, I'd be very wary of that and try to do everything I could to avoid that occurring. And now let's get down to the basic stuff. You thought you were going to have your load delivered by 4 o'clock this afternoon, and your driver calls you and tells you he was placed out of service at 3:30 right up the street for a brake issue. So you're going to lose productivity from the driver and the truck itself with these brake violations if you're placed out of service. And even if you're not out of service, you're going to be placed until it gets repaired. The driver downtime. Drivers won't be real happy either if they're paid by the mile that they're not able to keep running. Now, is it part of their problem? Well, they could have maybe found it on the pre-trip, right? Post-trip or en route. But regardless, it's still a problem. So from a fleet maintenance point of view, the tighter you can get that fleet maintenance, the less your drivers will be impacted because things won't break. Things won't be out of service. And then customer confidence, I thought I was going to have my stuff by 4 o'clock, and now you're telling me I'm not going to get it till 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. That could be a problem. So really, now you're down to the real nuts and bolts of the whole reason you're in business is to deliver product and get customers. And now you can't service that customer because of that. So that's why fleets should care. We probably could have added, that's why drivers should care. It's really a combination of the both, that both entities should care about their brakes and getting things done properly. Dispatch manager roles starting today, starting this afternoon, as soon as this call's over. If you're a dispatcher or manager, try to call your drivers. Hopefully you have a small fleet. Maybe you have 3 drivers, 3 phone calls. If you have 8,000 drivers, it could be a bigger problem, but we probably have electronic devices, PeopleNet, Qualcomm. Start sending out messages. Brake Safety Week, August 23rd through the 29th. Be getting ready for some pictures we're going to send you. Check your brakes, do that whole thing. And now's the time. In-person follow-up. That guy that's got 3 drivers can probably go outside in the parking lot and meet him at the end of the day or the beginning of the day. The 3,000 or 8,000 member fleet, chances are you're not going to meet the driver. But if you can, it's worth going out, meeting the driver, shaking his hand. Hey, let's go through a quick pre-trip and take a look at the brakes. Daily reminders, feel free to use those PDFs that I'm sending you as daily reminders, whether you print them, whether you can get them into a computer system where they're available to the driver, whatever it takes, it'll be helpful. And then always, and this is with anything driving, inspecting, is get with the drivers and reinforce the fact that they really need to do this. This is part of their job as a professional driver to do this. The ramifications or the consequences of not doing it can be catastrophic for other people, not the least of which themselves. There's runaway ramps out in Colorado on I-70 and 80 and 90 for a reason. So it's really encourage safe practices if you can with your drivers. Preparation is key. So let's talk about driver communication, right? Where it all starts. I just went through it. We ended with that. Safety meetings. I know there's only 10 days between now and the end. If you can schedule some, or if you have them scheduled, that's perfect. If you don't, maybe try to schedule a safety meeting. Maybe in the morning before the drivers leave, do a real quick safety meeting just to get the point across. The PDF reminders, again, I kind of mentioned that. We're going to have a couple PDFs that you're going to have. Refresher training. Go into the system, and that dovetails actually right here with the review recent events. Go into your system, find out what drivers are having an issue. What driver just got inspected last week and got a violation for a brake? That's the guy I want to talk to. I want to follow up with him, make sure that he clearly understands what a violation is and how important this is. So go in and look at the driver's record, see who's been inspected. You should be able to see that. I can go in when I do safety meetings for companies. I'm able to go in and see their inspection history. I can't see the driver, but I can see when they've been inspected. I can see the state truck. And a lot of times, that's all you need. I don't need to know the driver. But you as a company or whatever capacity you're in on this call has the ability to see that this was Joe Smith that got placed out of service for the brakes. And then last, encourage questions. Drivers, I was one of them. I was reluctant to ask questions. I think most drivers generally are. You might just want to push a little bit and say, hey, do you got any questions? And I'm sure you do. What questions do you have? Because inevitably they'll walk away from you and then they'll go ask their buddy right down the road who doesn't have the answers either, although you had the answer, but he just felt uncomfortable or she felt uncomfortable asking you. So the review, after this is all said and done, let's go back and talk to the drivers. How did they do? If you did great, great. Short conversation. If we didn't do so good, let's talk about why we didn't do so good. What were the violations, Joe? Let's talk about the violations. Look at how this impacted your PSP score, and look at how this impacted our CSA score as a company. So what opportunities do you have as a manager, dispatcher, as a company, as a safety department as a whole, to try to improve performance going forward? Again, the CSA impact, I think this is what, the third, fourth time I mentioned it in this webinar. So again, pretty important. Probably don't have to explain to a lot of people what that is, but we want to address that. And then how are we going to make it better going forward? That should be with anything, right? How am I going to get better going forward? From the bottom line driver, what can I do better today that I didn't do so good yesterday, to the company itself? How can we do better today and improve what we did yesterday? Should always be a question asked. It should be a never-ending process of improvement. There should never be a day when anybody sits there and says, I'm as good as I can be today. I have no need to get any better. Next, strong safety culture. It wins every week. And the key to this, and I want to thank Conrad for having this slide in there. He put it in for another purpose on another webinar, and I stole it from him. Hopefully he doesn't charge me. But really, the safety culture, it's a constant, repetitive, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly thing. The culture is a culture. It's not an event. So Brake Safety Week should help identify needed areas of improvement, and consistency matters more than just 1 week of preparation. So granted, we're on this call, we got 10 days to get this figured out, and then we're going to have 7 days of it occurring. But really, that should be a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly culture to keep winning. So keep that in mind as you move forward. Last, some of the resources. These are going to identify the four of the PDFs that we're going to give you. I put a couple links down in here. This air brake book, in case no one has it, really another great, you don't even have to purchase this. I think you can download it for free. I think I have a newer version, but regardless, a great book, great information. It's kind of techie. I mean, if you're a mechanic, you'd love it. I'm not a mechanic and I still loved it, but I think management in and of itself should have a copy of this just on their side, and right next to the CVSA and the regulation book, to whichever one you use, whether it be J.J. Keller or an outside vendor. Those 3 books are really 3 of the most important books in my mind that you as a company can keep on your desktop. And I think we can wrap it up. Oh, Conrad, you didn't warn me.
I thought
Conrad
you were
was
going to go
supposed
through
to
each
tell me,
one.
because I get so excited on these, I forget that I do some animation. So we're going to have to watch these little green dots go before I can get to the next slide. And that is going to be the end slide. So I want to thank you, everybody, very much. I know it was a lot of information, a lot of pictures, a lot of stuff coming at you. I hope you can make sense of it. Best of luck during this upcoming Brake Safety Week. I hope everybody's successful. And I want to thank everyone for the opportunity for me to address everyone on this call. I really enjoy it. And I want to give Conrad and AIM a thank you for allowing me to do it. So I'm going to turn it over to Conrad, and everybody have a great day.
Yeah, no, well, thank you, John. That was great information, and hopefully everyone has a better idea of what to expect during Brake Safety Week, and more importantly, some practical steps you can take back to your operation before inspections begin on August 23rd. Now, we'd like to open things up for Q&A, and while we're doing this, I'd encourage you to scan the QR code there on the screen to sign up for a free transportation analysis. Basically, one of our experts will meet with you, take a look at your operation, make recommendations, and go over how AIM services can help. I mean, whatever information you get is, of course, yours to keep, whether you do business with us or not. Now, moving into the Q&A here, we did receive a couple of questions in advance through the registration form. So I'll start with those. And again, feel free to ask a question in the chat or the Q&A function while we're addressing these questions. So the first one we got, John, is if a driver identifies a brake issue during a pre-trip inspection while they're away from their home terminal, what's the best way for a fleet to handle that situation from a safety and compliance standpoint?
Well, the first phone call should be to your road rescue, we'll call. We call it road rescue at AIM. I'm sure companies have all different names. That would probably be the first call to get the process started, to get the repair made if it's needed. The second call, if you're unsure, would be to the safety department, someone such as myself, to get a better clarification on what needs to be done and whether or not I can continue to drive with it, or if I have to stop. So really, I think it's a pretty simple proposition. I would start the process of road rescue because that takes time to implement and begin. Then once that call is made, then you would call the safety department. And those are really the only two options. I mean, I wouldn't trust a mechanic coming out necessarily. They don't necessarily know all the regulations. A lot of mechanics, and it happens to us, we've had mechanics come out to change a tire and said, well, do me a favor, follow me to the next facility, which could be who knows how far away, and I'll fix it there. And you having a tech with you does not release you from having to stop and get it repaired. So a lot of times mechanics themselves don't know the rules. I wouldn't rely on a mechanic. I'd rely on my safety department, safety director, safety manager. And I'm not saying that dispatchers don't know, but the dispatchers, in my mind, should know. And that would be the reason for one of those 3 books that I said should be on their desk. But I would lean more towards calling the safety department and my safety manager versus taking advice from the dispatcher. Not that he doesn't know, but my safety guy, if he doesn't know, he'll find out for me, and he's the definitive word on whether I go or not.
Yeah, and that kind of dovetails into the second question we had. It's how much responsibility falls on the driver versus the maintenance team when it comes to preventing these brake-related violations, and where do you typically see communication breakdown between the two?
Off the cuff, and I think everybody would tend to agree with it on this call, the ultimate responsibility comes down to the driver. Officer stops you and, oh, the mechanics didn't do it. Okay, but you're driving the truck. Ultimately, and it's a tough spot to be in. Ultimately, it is the driver's responsibility. The second half of that question, can you refresh me on that, Conrad, real quick?
Yeah, let me bring it back up. So if the second half was basically where does that communication between the driver and the maintenance team usually break down?
I would think that the breakdown occurs from lack of communication. It's not the driver getting in the morning on his pre-trip and not telling the maintenance department that there's a problem.
Yeah.
So I would put it more towards the fact that the driver didn't communicate that there was a problem as the biggest hurdle.
Yeah.
So really the driver communicating with the maintenance department or someone, safety department, dispatch, to get the process rolling. If the maintenance department doesn't know there's a problem, guess what? There's probably not a problem. I only know there's a problem when you tell me there's a problem. So again, it's the driver's responsibility to make that happen because he is the only one that knows that's happening.
Great. Yeah, makes sense. Well, I don't know how we did it, John, but it's 3 o'clock on the dot, so it couldn't have timed out more perfectly. So I think that's a good place to wrap things up. So first, John, just thank you again for taking the time to share your expertise with us today. And thank you to everyone who joined us. We know how valuable your time is, and we really appreciate you spending a part of your afternoon with AIM. And if today's discussion raised questions about your own fleet or maintenance program, AIM is here to help. Again, those services, from full service truck leasing and preventative maintenance to professional shop management and dedicated contract carriage and more. Our team, we can help you find the right solution for your operation. And again, you can scan that QR code there if you haven't already and sign up for a free transportation analysis, or feel free to shoot me an email and I'd be happy to connect you with one of our experts in your area. And then, as John mentioned earlier, we will be following up with a follow-up email that's going to contain some additional resources that you can pass out to your drivers and other people in your organization, as well as a link to the recording of this webinar. And that should come out. I'm going to try to have it out by tomorrow. If not, it'll be early next week, Monday, for sure. So again, on behalf of John and everyone at AIM Transportation Solutions, thank you again for joining us, and stay safe, good luck, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, John.
Bye-bye. Thank you.